Nothing was na sadasit, no sadasit. Nothing was there, but this nothing also was not there, because you can speak of nothing when everything is there. So at that time, nothing also was not there. And tamasi tamasa gurhamagre, darkness was hidden in the womb of darkness. Ko adha veda kayha pravochat. Who can tell us how all these things came into being? And if there be somebody who can tell us, does he know? Ko adha veda nava. So they even dispute God's existence. So Vedas are not the words of God. Ko adha veda kaiha pravochat. Sa veda yadiva na. If there is a God, even he would not know how things came into existence. So Vedas are not words of God. That's it. And not all the Rigvedic hymns deal with God also. That's what I told you earlier. They are poetic collections. But the Mimamsakas, they are the adherents and exponents of the Vedas. They argue about the infallible character of the Veda. Because they want to project Veda as the authority for everything, as he asked. So Dharma Shastras have Vedas as the authority. Are Vedas infallible? Vedas are infallible only in this sense, they say. Apaurusheya. It is not written by a particular man. Apaurusheya is not man-made, but there is no Rigvedic hymn without an associated sage. There is a custom with us, whenever you recite a Vedic hymn, you must tell who the Rishi was, who was the seer, and what meter it is in, and what the purport of the hymn. Rishi, Chandas, and the Viniyoga. So every Vedic hymn has the name of a Rishi who gave it to us. So it is not revealed in that sense. It is the word of man. A sage, Gayatri for example, is given by Vishwamitra. When we recite Gayatri, we say Vishwamitra Rishi, Gayatri Chandaha, Savita Devata, Om Tat Savitur. So there is no hymn in the Rig Veda which is not connected with a man who gave rise to it. But that man who gave this utterance did not give it in his normal condition. He was in a supernatural condition when he gave this. This makes him a Rishi. So that makes it infallible. The particular state in which he was at the time of giving it, this was unusual, this was supernatural. So at that time he saw something which we are not able to see. This is all that the Apaurushayatva of the Veda means.
So this is a question, origin. There is an origin,
known origin, no.
Rishis are known.
Every single Rishi is known. There are 115 Rishis who are listed in the Anukramani. And their Gotra is mentioned, his father is mentioned, his son is mentioned. There are details about these sages. And about the Upanishads I will speak separately. Is there anything else that you asked? You asked 3 questions.
Number one, it was not written, it was the
Utterance. Until very recently, even the way how I learned, I did not read a book. I had to. Even today, they are not taught in books. Printed books are there, but they are not used. Yes. Even Shankara Bhashya, when I learned traditionally under a teacher, I used to carry a printed book. And my teacher asked, close that book and keep it aside. And he would recite and I had to repeat after him.
Because pronunciation is very important.
Pronunciation and also pustakadhita tu ya vidya. A lower importance is attached to book learning. Which we today pride upon. We speak of the 3 starting points, prasthanas, for the philosophical discipline known as the Vedanta. In Vedanta, there are 3 basic definitive texts. The first is the Upanishads, which form the last part, the concluding portions of the Vedic literature. Therefore, they are called the Vedanta, the end portions of the Veda. And the second is the philosophical knowledge that was codified and systematized into a Shastra, which is the Brahma Sutra, Badarayana's Brahma Sutra. This is the second starting point. The third starting point is the Gita. The Gita, the text occurs in the Mahabharata, in the Bhishma Parva. Just when the battle was about to begin, Arjuna has some serious qualms of conscience and Krishna answers them, and this is the theme of the Bhagavad Gita. But in most of the early editions of Mahabharata, which the Bhandarkar Research Institute examined, this Gita does not form a part of the Mahabharata. It perhaps was an independent text. But the claim is that the Gita comprehends and condenses the Upanishadic wisdom. Sarvopanishada gavo, dogdha gopalanandanaha, partho bhokta, etc., etc. So this Gita is supposed to be a condensation of the Upanishadic wisdom. And if the Upanishads are called the Shruti, or the infallible part of the Veda, this is called the Smriti, the lesser authority. So among the Bhashyakaras, if he has to cite an Upanishad, he would not cite a Gita. Gita has a lesser authority than the Upanishads. Gita, should I speak about the Gita or no? Is it... Kavi is because of the Kavya. Kavya is poetry as such, what you might call the didactic poetry, narrative poetry. So Valmiki, he had this vision, but he also had the capacity to express in very mellifluous and very sonorous words. So there is a saying, Svachepi Darshane Adikaver Munehe. Kavi Valmiki was a rishi, but he was not a kavi. He was not called a kavi. Yavad Varnana Loke Jata Tav. As long as there was an utterance which assumed a peculiar significance, he was not called a poet. You know that saying, that story, that Valmiki as a sage was walking along the banks of Tamasa, and there the two Krauncha birds were engaged in amorous deal, and a hunter hit one of them, and the other cried piteously. Valmiki heard that cry, and he cursed the hunter. Manishada pratishtham tvam magamaha shashvati samaha. But later on, he regretted. Why did I enter into the picture? The hunter did his job, what he was always doing. And I am not responsible for the birds. But why did I curse this hunter? And then he said, Sloko bhavato nanyatha. What I said became merely a verse. May this be a mere poetic composition. May it not take effect. So that Manishada Pratishtham was a poetical utterance, and based on that he wrote an entire kavya. But the Vedas are not like this. Vedas are mere utterances. There is no poetical elegance about it. Whereas in Adikavya there is poetical elegance. There are upamas, alankaras, various kinds of embellishments. Valmiki, for example, speaks of clear water. Akardamamidam tirtham ramaniyam prasannambu. The water is deep, the water is clear. At once he says, Sanmanushya mano yatha, like the mind of a good man. That's poetry, pure poetry. So you don't find such things in Rig Veda. Yeah. Which one? Nasadi Sukta. But it all depends on what you mean by poetry. So formal poetry should be didactic, it should have a theme, it should have the various descriptions, etc., etc. So the Alankarikas, literary critics, they have their own expectations of a poetic piece. There are these critics from a long time now, you say. No.
Somebody says which is right, and later person says something which is one thing.
No, in the tradition, we don't take that standpoint at all. Each poet, each rishi is a fully competent rishi. There can be no question of questioning him on any account. If he has one perception, the another rishi has a different perception, which are equally valid.
That is what I was trying to figure out. Is there any aspect on which the two rishis
there is no attempt to do that at all.
Actually, in one of the discourses by her, they were quoting this as a proof to prove it is Amanisha.
I mean, different revelations. And each one has a right to his revelation. And you know, the country has been particularly barren of intellectual achievements during these past 500 to 600 years. This would be a big span of time. As you go back, the dates are a little uncertain, very difficulty in hearing. As we go back, the dates are a little uncertain, but the entire span of development is about 4,000 to 5,000 years. And philosophy, as everything else, is a product of the people. And Indian society has always been complex. It is one of the major anthropological ideas that has to be taken into account, that Indian population has always been mixed, and rightly have they called this an anthropological museum. If one surveys the group here, we find all racial strands, all possible specimens of the Homo sapiens sapiens. Indian population has always been mixed, and there has been a racial admixture going back to the days of the Indus Valley civilization. Even in the finds there you find Negritos, Mongoloids, Caucasian, Alpine, all strands being depicted in these seals. As a result of which, there has been a variety of not merely ways of living, but a variety of thought also. Thinking has been various. Thinking has been variegated. There are several strands of thinking which is reflected in philosophy. If philosophy has different philosophical schools, different standpoints, and different orientations, and different needs, it's because the population has always been so complex and mixed. Well, a convenient starting point is the Vedic literature, because Veda is the world's oldest book. There is no book on record which goes back to earlier days. Veda is the oldest of the human documents. And as I mentioned the other day, Veda is one, but for purposes of various vinyogas or the applications, it has been considered as fourfold. I also mentioned that Rigveda has no philosophy of its own because it was not meant to be a philosophical text. As I also mentioned, Rigveda Samhita means a collection, a compilation. 100 and odd sages and their utterances have been compiled together. Samhita means to put together, to bring together. So Rigveda Samhita is a compilation. Various utterances of the sages have been brought together. Some of them are no doubt mystical in outlook. Some of them are practical prescriptions, like what I quoted the other day, adhav pasyasvanopari, look below and not look above. But much of Veda, as I said, is poetical and descriptive. To give you an idea of the freshness of the thought and the poetic orientation in this, I seek your leave to quote one verse, one hymn from the Rigvedic collection, which has appealed to Mr. Bhatia very much, so he wanted me to give him a copy of it with a translation. I have brought it. So I will make use of it to give you a sort of a glimpse into the trends that you find in the Vedic period. This is about a poet or a seer or a sage who is bewildered at the enormity of the world around him. And his mind goes back to a period when all this was not there. All this has come into being. But how was it before anything came into being? So when he started ruminating on this, cogitating on this mantra came into existence. Na sadasi no sadasi tadanim nasid vyomo narajo tadasid. At the time when you are thinking about the beginning of everything, nothing was not there. Nothing was there. Na sadasit. And nothing also was not there because nothing is a relative term. If you say nothing, it's with reference to something else. That something also was not there. So nothing was there, nothing also was not there. No vyoma rajo yat. There was no space. There was no sky beyond. And kimavari vah kuhakasya sharman ambhah kimasid gaganam gabhiram. All this has come into being. But what was it that covered all this at that time? All that has come must have been there in some form, because something can't come out of nothing. But what was it that covered all that at that time? Kim avarivaha. And kuha kasya sharman. Where did all these things rest? There was nothing, there was no nothing, and there was no atmosphere, there was no space, there was nothing at all. But where rested all these things? Kuhakasya sharban, ambhashkimasit, gahanam gabhiram. Or was there a mass of water which was profound and endless? Was it that covered all this? Na mrutyurasid amrutam na tarhi na ratriya akhnagasid praketaha. Death was not there. Death means life. Death was not there. But was there life? Life also was not there. Death was not there. Immortality was not there. And ratriya akhnagasi na praketaha. Day was not different from night. Darkness was not different from light. And Anidavatam swadhayatadekam tasmadha anyan aparahynchanasa. But there must have been something that was breathing. All the Anidavatam, without breath, it must have been breathing. Anidavatam. How? Swadhayatadekam. On its own impulsion. There must have been something, some impulsion with na anyah kinchana. There was nothing else at that time. Tamagasi tamasa gulhamagre apraketam salilam sarvama idam. Then darkness was hidden in the womb of darkness. It was indescribable, undiscernible. And apraketam salilam sarvama idam. This water, which is the symbol of mystery, that was there everywhere. Apraketam, undifferentiated mystery was there. And tuchena bhu apihitam yadasit tapasastan mahina jayataikam. This void was hidden, was covered by chaos. Abhu tuchena. They have made use of the two words. Nothing was there, but there was chaos covering it. So chaos always prevails when there is nothing in it. So when there is order, chaos will not come into being. Well, they say this chaos, it covered this void, apihitam. And what was hidden beneath? Tapasat and mahina ajayataikam. By its own inward fervor, it grew into all this. Tapasat and mahina ajayata. And what was the void hidden inside, by its own inward fervor, came out and became everything. Kamastadagre samavartatadhi manasoretah prathamam yadasit. At that time, there was the urge, the impulsion. Kama. Tadagre samavartata. Kama is not a desire in the normal term. The urge, the impulsion, that was all that was there. For the entire creation, for the entire world, the source of it is this urge or the impulsion. Kamaha tadagre. And out of it, manasaha retaha yadasi. And it goes on, Tiraschino vitato rashmiresham. Then there was a streak of light which flashed across, and adhasvidasit uparisvidasit. You couldn't say that the streak of light was below or above. Retodha asan mahimana asan swadha avastat prayatif prayastat. All this came out as a result of this urge or primeval impulsion and the ray of light that flashed across. And who made this? Ko adha veda kaiha pravochat. Who can let us know what made this? And kuta ajata kuta iyam visrishtihi. Why did this creation come into existence? Whence did this creation come into existence? And how? Ko adha. Who can tell us? Arvak devasya visarjanena. And all the gods that you think of and worship, they all came later. Arvak devaha visarjanena atha koveda yata ababhuva. How can the gods know what was there before they came into existence? Even the gods can't unravel this mystery. Iyam visrishtir yata ababhuva. How did this come into existence? Yadiva dadhe, yadiva na. Is there someone who holds it up? Some spirit which holds it up? Or no? Who can tell? Ko yo asyadhyakshah parame vyoman. If there is somebody who is overseeing this whole thing, he might tell us. Yo asyadhyakshah parame vyoman soanga veda yadiva na. Or perhaps even he does not know. Well, this is a sample of the Vedic poetry, which is surcharged with a mysticism which is very, very profound. Well, the different thoughts which were responsible for the emergence of the different systems. In these you can trace the purely folk elements. By folk elements, I mean the products of collective thinking. People gather together and incidentally think of various things. They discuss, they argue, and then they settle down to some conclusions which are circulated orally among the people, the folk traditions. The Samkhya, the Yoga, the Lokayata are the results of these folk thinking. Samkhya, I will come to it a little later. Samkhya is the source of all Indian thought. It contains the basic ideas of all thinking that went on, that grew later in the country. Yoga, which harks back to an old way of practice by means of which the mind could be sharpened, refined and collected and absorption achieved. This also is a folk element. And Lokayata, as the term itself means, so there were these folk thinking which evolved into Darshanas later on. And on the other hand, there were the elite thinking, sophisticated thinking, learned people, those who called themselves wise. They sat together in a conference and evolved a system. The Nyaya, the Vaisheshika, the Mimamsa, the Vedanta are instances of these sophisticated way of thinking. Well, for both of these, Veda offers numerous references of existence of these folk thinking as well as the sophisticated thinking. The Veda, to repeat, does not contain a philosophy of its own, but one of the appendices that was added to the Vedic literature and which was later considered as an independent Veda, the Atharva Veda, contains numerous ideas about philosophical and other disciplines. So if we have to trace Indian philosophy to any Vedic text, it's to the Atharva Veda that you should trace, because there are suktas there which deal with these problems of life, the problems of existence, the problem of God, the problem of self, and so on and so forth. And Atharva Veda for the first time discusses the meaning in life and the need on the part of man to recognize that life has a meaning. So Atharva Veda is the text which contains folk elements as well as the sophisticated thinking in a sort of a synthesis. Well, the Vedic literature has 4 phases of development. The first is called the Samkhya, sayings, songs, utterances, half sentences, gathered together and made out into a tech corpus. But soon society evolved or degenerated. They became ritualistic. People tended to become ritualistic. What's the use of a poetic rhapsody about God and about nature and about this and that? Should not all that be translated into certain rituals, certain sacrifices? So as an addendum to the Rig Veda or the Samhita, the Brahmana texts were added. Brahmana literally means a sacrifice. It does not refer to a caste. I mentioned the other day several terms which have changed their connotation during the passage of time. Brahmana literally means a sacrifice. Is a collection of Vedic hymns taken out of the Rig Veda and used during the course of a ritual. There were several rituals. Several of these hymns were to be recited by the priests, 4 kinds of priests, the Hotra, the Udgratra, and so on. They had to recite these things in several sequences of the sacrifice or a ritual. So the Brahmana is a ritualistic text. It is left to you to regard this as an evolution of thought or a degeneration of thought. But the Vedic wisdom was tight-jacketed into a ritualistic context. But luckily for us, the Brahmana has 2 aspects. The first aspect is called vidhi. Vidhi means an injunction. How a sacrifice is to be conducted, how a ritual has to be gone through, who are the priests, where should they sit, and how the offerings ought to be made, what kinds of food offerings ought to be, etc., etc., etc. The whole list of prescriptions. This is the vidhi. But luckily, there was another unimportant part which also was tucked in as a sort of an appendix. And this was called the Arthavada. Arthavada is an explanation. Why should the priest sit at a particular place? Why should a particular food be offered to the fire? And why should the fire be ignited, light be ignited in a particular... So the Arthavada tried to explain all this. And during the course of explanations, they wove fanciful stories, myths, legends, ballads, and also hazarded certain philosophical speculations. So this Arthavada, it belongs to what you might call the Jnanakanda of the Veda, whereas the Vidhi, it refers to the Karmakanda of the Veda, rituals. But these are not relevant to one who performs the sacrifice. But one who keeps at a distance and watches this, he would require this Arthavada section. Well, there were always some people who were non-conformists. As they are now, they have always been there. There were a group of people who tried to figure out these sacrifices are to be performed according to the Brahmana text. But what do they really mean? Are these to be taken literally, or is there a metaphorical symbolism to it? So some people try to figure out an Ashwamedha is to be conducted. Ashwamedha is a horse sacrifice. Does it mean that a horse has to be really brought in, killed, and a part of it has to be sacrificed? These conformists said no. Ashwa, according to the etymological meaning of the Nirukta, it refers to the arrogance of man, the pride of man. So Ashwamedha is the sacrificing of this arrogance or pride. So the symbolic meaning of Ashwamedha is not bringing a horse and killing it, but an individual refinement wherein he lowers down his own ego or his own arrogance. So people began to think symbolically of these sacrifices. The Saman, the Sautrayani, the Jyotishtoma. So these people who did not participate in these rituals, those who snapped at the rituals, but those who said many people follow it, there must be something to it. What is that something? It is the symbolic meaning behind it and not the actual act. So their thought also has been documented, and this part is called the Aranyaka. Aranyaka is those who retire to the forest retreats and then thought about these things profoundly, deeply. So Samhita to Brahmana, Brahmana to Aranyaka, and the intensive thinking, it was followed by a stage of the absolutist thinking of the Upanishads. So the Upanishads are the final phase of the Vedic corpus. Samhita, Brahmana, Aranyaka, and finally the Upanishads. The Brahmana has two sections, Vidhi and Arthavada. Vidhi is the ritualistic prescriptions. Arthavada is the explanations hazarded by myths and legends, etc., etc. A development of the Arthavada was the Aranyaka, and a further development of the Aranyaka was the Upanishads. Well, the Upanishad, the word, has several meanings. One of the usual meanings accepted is Sadhu is to sit. The root word is Sadhu. Sadhu is to sit. It has two prefixes, Upa and Ni. Upa is near, Samipe. Upa is near, Samipe. Ni, Nitaram. Ni is well. So the word Upanishad merely means to sit near very well. To sit very well near. So the word to sit where? To sit near the teacher with no intention of graduating in a limited period. Sitting very well is with no desire to get out of it. No desire to get up. This is Nisad, sitting well. With a deep commitment, he sits. Let me fathom this. Let me understand the mystery of this. And let me not be distracted by anything else. This is Nisat. And you can't do it all by yourself. You go to a man who knows about it and sit near him. So Upanishad is merely going to a teacher, sitting with him, barring all other interests in life. This is the only interest that he has. So Upanishads are a series of discourses which are imparted from a teacher to a disciple or a student who has cared to sit with him diligently and with no other interest. So this was not the instruction that was given on a platform. This was given in confidence. So Upanishads are also secret instructions, confidential instructions. A teacher who has liked a student, who has examined him and has been satisfied with his bona fides, he imparts to him the knowledge that he has. So the Upanishads thus are secret teachings, confidential teachings, and teachings pertaining to the things which are not normally understood, the atindriya, or what are not normally available. But the earlier Upanishads are only 10 in number. There are only 10 Upanishads, and I suppose I will give them in my synopsis. Ishakena katha prasna mundaka mandokya taittariya aitareya brahadaranyaka chandogyani. Brahadaranyaka chandogya isha kena katha prasna munduka. So these are the 10 major Upanishads. 10 Upanishads. But the number of Upanishads also grew in later times, and another Upanishad, Mauktika Upanishad, it lists as many as 108 Upanishads. But most of the Upanishads listed there don't answer to the secret instructions about the supernatural, but they are sectarian. They glorify Shiva, they glorify Vishnu, they glorify this and that. There are the Yoga Upanishads, there is the... So the real Upanishads, the genuine Upanishads, are only 10 in number. If you examine them, there are certain common features that stand out. The first is they turn their back on rituals altogether. They said, these are fools. Dandramyamana pariyanti moodhaha andhena iva niyamana yatandhaha. These people who are given to rituals, these people who are engaged in sacrifices, who go around the fire in a ritual, in a rite, these are all fools, moodhaha. And they are like the blind men being led by the blind. Andhena iva niyamana yatandhaha. So these rituals they condemn as worthless, as of no significance whatsoever. And if the rituals point out to the attainment of a swarga or a heaven, they criticize the swarga itself as a non-existent thing. So the Upanishads are anti-ritualistic in their orientation. Throughout, they relegate karma to a very low level, and they attach a great importance to wisdom or jnana. This was the first distinguishing feature of the Upanishads. Then the early Upanishads, the major teachers in these Upanishads are all Kshatriyas. They are not Brahmanas. They are all Rajanyas, princelings, Kshatriyas. Janaka, Pravahana Jaivali, Mahidasa Itareya, Ashwapati Kaikaya. So these are all Kshatriyas. So Upanishads are actually a contribution of the Kshatriyas to the Indian wisdom. And some of the teachers here are from what we normally consider the lower rungs. There is the Raikva, who is a carter. His profession is to drive the cart, Raikva. But great men come to him, sit at his feet and learn the wisdom from him, this Raikva. And another great sage, Jabal, Satyakama Jabala, he was born out of an illicit wedlock. He becomes a great sage, he becomes a great sage in his own. And there was another Ushasti Chakrayana, who was a beggar, who was walking along the streets. But they recognized that he was a wise man, and great scholars from different countries come, sit at his feet and learn the wisdom. So Upanishads have a flavor of their own. They are not elite productions. They are the profound human beings anywhere, from any strata of society. They have given rise to this. And many of these people, they come from the present Kurukshetra area, from Punjab to Videha or the Bihar. So Upanishads are a contribution of this part of the country, from Punjab on one side and Bihar on the other. So this Kurukshetra was a scene where where the Upanishads took their rise. Thirdly, they discounted the testimony of the observations, perceptions, or the pratyaksha, or the normal human ratiocinations. They said, how far can the eye lead you? How far can the sense organs lead you? And how far can your small head thinking lead you? So they rejected the infallibility of observation and inference, and they pointed out there must be something else by means of which you can understand profound things. And one of the Upanishads says, what is important, what is really significant, what you call Brahma, is not what your eye can see. Yat chakshusha na pasyati, yena chakshumshi pasyati. Not what, don't bother about what the eye sees, but bother about that by means of which the eye can see, without which the eye can't see. Why don't you bother about that? Yen manasana manute, yenahur manomatam. Don't bother about what mind can think, but do bother about by means of which the mind can think. What gives the power to the mind to think? What gives the eyes the power to see? Yet chakshusha na pasyati, yena chakshumshi pasyati, tadeva vidhi. Know that. So, the interest of the Upanishads, contrary to the Brahmanas and even the Aranyakas, was inward. Don't look out to get at the reality. Look inside to get the reality. So the really real is not outside you, it is inside you. So this inward orientation is another distinctive feature of the Upanishads. Where the Vedas are concerned with the world, and the Atharva Veda is concerned with an examination of the world, the analysis of the sense organs, and the analysis of the various perceptual data. But the Upanishad said, leave all that aside. Anyavacho vyamunchata. Leave all that aside. Inquire into the reality without which you can't think, you can't be, you can't move about. So this inward orientation, along with the rejection of karma or the ritualistic action, and an emphasis on jnana, this gave a peculiar slant to Indian thought, the inward orientation. And it gave another sociological detail of significance. A Veda, a ritual is always a collective one. All the Vedic yajnas, they have to be participated by several categories of priests and several people who participate in it, sabhyas. So there is no griha yajna as such in the Veda. All these are public functions where the entire community participates. So the Vedic orientation is communal, more towards collective thinking, collective operation, collective action. But the Upanishad said, leave the other man alone, think of yourself, because the search for truth is a narrow path where two people can't tread. Ekayanaha ayam pantha. This path is what one man can tread on the basis of his own experience, his own orientations, his own samskaras, his own vasanas. So it is a one man track. So this rejected the community involvement in spiritual matters. All spiritual aspirations are individual. So religion has to be a one-man affair. Religion has to be an individual affair and not a community affair. So the king for individualism which is very strong in the Indian population, has to be traced back to the Upanishadic lead. When you think of yourself, forget about your neighbor. You have to reach the salvation on your own. So this becomes a very important feature. Now, about the major teachings of the Upanishads. The Upanishads took man as the starting point of all inquiry, and there was a systematic, intensive analysis of the structure of man. There is a fine Rupaka or an allegory in one of the Upanishads, Kathopanishads. The Ratha simile, Ratha Rupaka, a chariot. Atmanam Rathinam Vidhi, Shariram Rathamevatu. This body is a chariot, and you are the owner of the chariot. Atmanam Rathinam Vidhi, Shariram Rathamevatu. Buddhintu Sarathim Vidhi. The driver or the chauffeur who plies the vehicle is the buddhi or the intellect. Buddhintu Sarathim Vidhi. And he holds the reins in his hands. Manah pragrahamevacha. Mind is the reins he holds in his hands. And Indriyani hayannahuhu. Our various sense organs, they are the horses that are tied to this chariot, that are yoked to this chariot. Indriyani hayannahu. Vishayan teshu gocharan. And the world is where this chariot is moving about. And in this, the most important aspect that they emphasize is the horses must be well tamed. If the horses are not tamed, dushtasvayava sarathehe, if they are pranksters, they will lead the chariot to disaster. They will make it fall into a gutter. So it is altogether necessary to have the sense organs under control. So self-control in the matter of disciplining the sense organ is an essential thing. Sadashvayava sarathe. And then you must instruct the chauffeur well where you want to go, what your destination is, what your work is. So the sarathi or the intellect must be disciplined, and manaha and the reins or the mind. So the entire Rupaka, the entire allegory, it harps on disciplining of the sense organs, disciplining of the mind, disciplining of the intellect, so that you will be able to reach the summum bonum or the final goal. But normally, people are not interested in doing this, because parang chikhani vyatrunatu swayambhuhu tasmat parang pasyati nantaratman. What's the nature of the sense organs? The consciousness within pierced these openings and came out. So eye is an opening, ear is an opening, nose is an opening, parang chikhani, these are the holes for the self to get into communion with the outside world, so that man has a natural tendency to look out. Indriyas, the eye, is geared to see an object that is outside it. The eye is not meant to see what is inside it. The ear is to hear a sound from outside. If the ear hears the sound from inside, you go to a doctor. That's not the normal work of a sense organ at all. Sense organs are meant to commune with the world. They are meant to go out. So parang chikani vyatrunatu swayambhuhu tasmat parang pasyati nantaratman. A normal man, a sane man, would not look inside. He would look outside. He would be a normal man. He would be an ordinary man. But atadhiraha kaschit. But here and there, Now and then, there is some bold man who does not care to look out. He closes his eyes and looks within. Atmanamaichat amritatvamichan avritta chakshuhu. So to see, we open our eyes. But here is a crazy man who shuts his eyes to see. What he sees is what is inside and not what is outside. So the Upanishads say this attitude of blocking the outside and opening inside, this is of the greatest importance in a pursuit to understand reality. And then the word that is used is tapas. Tapas strictly means heat. Tapas is the production of artificial heat in the body by taking recourse to several ascetic practices. That's the normal meaning of the word tapas also is that ascetic practices. But the main thing is, we are cold, we must become warm. And unless there is heat within, the revelation of the beyond does not occur. For that to occur, there must be some heat, warmth within. And this warmth comes out of intense concentration, intense application to the exclusion of everything else. This tapas is also called swadhyaya, or turning inward very fiercely. And there is an Upanishad which says, Sayadi tishtannasīnaśayāno vā svādhyāyamadhīte tapayeva tattapyate tapohi svādhyāyayiti. When one applies himself to this task of inward seeing, tishtannasīnaha shayāno vā, when he is moving about, when he sits, when he sleeps, this is his preoccupation, this is his obsession, looking within, turning within, and shutting out the avenues to the outside world. This is tapas. This is the only way by means of which truth can be known. Until there is a transformation of the individual life and a heightening of the individual aspiration, the truth can't be revealed, the truth can't be known. So the Upanishads emphasize this tapas or swadhyaya as the method by means of which this could be achieved. And this takes three forms. One is going to somebody who has had this experience. Not all and sundry can teach you about this because they themselves have not reached that stage. But you must go to the people who have reached that stage and learn from them their own experiences, their own evaluations and their own appraisals of it. This technique is called Sravana. Sravana is Guru Sannidhau, going to a teacher and convincing him that you are not motivated by curiosity, you are not interested merely to know, to store and to trade it in clubs and meetings. You have a real, genuine interest because it is a problem of life and death for you. I must reach the Supreme or my life will be in vain. So when the teacher understands that he has this motivation and incidentally, for all such Upanishadic teaching, there is one necessary qualification that is insisted. Najato syat kutuhali. You should not be motivated by mere curiosity. Curiosity will not lead you into this. Najato syat kutuhali. Curiosity is not one of the strong points of Upanishadic inquiry. You must be convinced that there is something, some beyond, which it's possible for you to reach, and you can reach it. With this conviction, you go to the teacher, but What the teacher says tells you about is about his experience, which is of little interest to you. The Upanishads recognize that teacher will tell you about his experiences. He can't tell you what your experiences will be like. So his job ends when he says, as Buddha said sometime, I followed this path, I found out this. And if you follow the path, it is likely that you will also find out this. So that's all that the teacher is competent to say. The teacher can't go beyond this. After having gone to a teacher, the student must leave the teacher alone, retire to solitude and contemplate on what the teacher has told him. This is intense mental examination, consideration of what the teacher has said about the beyond. This is called manana. The first stage is shravana, where you get from the teacher the few rudiments of spiritual experience, a few things which might be common to him and you, common to all people. But then you should descend to your own level, your own interior. What he has found out, you may not find out. What is relevant to him may not be relevant to you. What is satisfying to him may not satisfy you. Therefore, it is very necessary that you should take that only as a starting point, and then you must settle down to an intense examination of that position. This is called manana. Manana is to think, contemplate, cogitate on what he has said. He has only given the guidelines. He has only showed the way. Akhyataro guravaha. The gurus can only show the way. They can't lead you along the way. You have to go along the way. So the manana is very important. You have to convince yourself about the veracity of the path that the Guru has shown you. And the Upanishad also says, when you intensely contemplate, when you think about it, cogitate about it, apply yourself, heart and soul into it, then you will develop a Guru inside you, antaro guruhu. A Guru who is outside is of little use to you. But a Guru who is inside, antaro guruhu, an inward Guru, he will come into being as a result of your application to the